Okay, mach mal einen Primer. Halo Frustration Primer. This is essentially a collection of potential use cases. Welcome to the world of holistic, efficient solutions. Prepare yourself to see what emerges out of your data if you finally start to embrace it. This video is uncut. We start from scratch, starting slowly. Notice that you will see some overlays in this video that will help you follow what's going on with the mouse, or some hidden keyboard keys near the bottom right corner of your screen. Anyway, if you feel lost, it's perfectly fine to just pause or rewind a bit. Also feel free to enable or disable subtitles. So now we're set to go. At the beginning we have a small table with just one cell. In order to have something to work on, we need to fill in some data. 3, 4, 5 we need for our experiment, and then we can add, for example, Alan in Boston, USA, in present, at law, and 100%. We add another record with Danny, of course. The rest is the same. Present, law, also 100. You can also edit another record by over here, and since this is pretty straightforward, we speed things up with some little helper. By the way, we only do this at most once per video, since there's more to life. And now we have something we almost can start working on. Let's give names to those fields. Person, let's say city, let's say country, that's a time, let's call it project, and that location, like this. And now let's tell Embrace to take those names as field names, and this is a good place to watch out for the status bar. Depending on where your mouse hovers, wherever that might be, you will see some additional information. This is our data, and now watch closely how we start bringing it to life. So let's resize it a bit, and let's open another shape so that we can better see what's going on. And for the first thing, let's go into the field list, and maybe let's have a look with project person, project and person. We do away with rank and we say over time. And then we can, for example, play around with the aggregates block if we like. I didn't quite hit it, now I hit it. And you can do transpositions if you like. You can do any sort of scrolling, and you can see how it has automatic sticky headlines either way. And yeah, that's the way it works here. Remember, changing the perspectives, what we just did, does not change your data. If we change values over here or over here, let's start over here, like 10, 20, 30. This, of course, is changing your data. It works either way. You can change over here or over there. You can even start adding data where no data was in to start with, like this. And you might notice that there are some holes popping up over here in the second shape. So we can do something about it by, for example, bringing structure to it. So let's have a look how to bring structure. So for that we go to the person and we say we pull that out in another table. We call the table persons, and the field inside we call just person, and then it's pulled out. We can explore it, and since the cities are closer to the persons, we move it over here, and likewise the countries as well. And we repeat it for the city. Let's make a table called cities with a field called city. We can expand it and move the country where it belongs to, next to the cities. And then two more time, one for the times. You see the pattern. And also lastly for the projects, we create a new table called projects, and we give the field the name project, and now we have it like this. And if we switch back again, you notice that those holes are gone now because we brought structure to our data. By the way, this is more or less the data that you will get if you press this load demo button later on, if you want to give it a try, besides those numbers over here. Good. There will be more benefits for bringing structure to the data, we will see in a minute. Maybe we also want to give that table a proper name, allocations, like this, and you might wonder what the other tables look like. So cities like this, persons like this, and we have 10 projects in here and 3 times. And by the way, maybe you wondered why we have former, future, and over there present. You can correct that now rather easily by just resorting over here. Now we former, present, and future. Nice. Be aware that the restructuring that we did actually did change our data, of course. Good. Maybe we start all over. One typical use case is people project allocation. And now let's have a closer look to this. Maybe we want to add the cities as well. So let's do it like this. Then we can go to the field list. And let's say we want to have project and person. Project and person over there. The time up, and we just remove this one and the rank as well. So that's the projects, and inside the people we duplicate the shape and then we change it slightly over here. Let's take the people above and let's add the cities as well over here. And then it looks like this. My button press. So, on the left-hand side we see the projects and the people, and on the right-hand side we see the people and then the projects. Either way has its merits. Over here you can easily add more projects to the people. Let's close this again as well. And on the left-hand side, it's easier adding people to the projects, obviously. So we could go over here and say insert record, and then we get an Alan, for example, and we can just add 10% over here, 20% over here, and just do away with this. So we just added Alan to the project. Over here, we could say in Boston there we have an Alan and we want to add another project to Alan. So again, we say we want to insert, and we could change to any project as we like. And again, we could enter data as we like over here. You have well, as said before, there are some benefits for having structured data. So you see it's all green here for the projects, but it's not all green when talking about the people over here, because by structuring the data, Embrace does know that there is some dependency between the cities of the people and the people themselves. So here we're talking about Boston, and in Boston we only have 2 people around. Nevertheless, you can still say you want to take Helen, for example, but this will have an impact to the surrounding clustering. So it will move Alan to Helen. So Alan is gone over here. Now we have Helen in New York. And likewise, if you want, you can change it back to Alan and take all of Alan's prior projects plus what Helen has along, and then it will move over here and Helen will be gone. So it's like that. That's the way constraints work. Maybe let's go to another use case. Let's start from scratch again. Allocations. Normally you would do that with extra data, but we just, for saving time, we will just adopt it. So on Kanban boards, actually we talk about tech. We talk about states, and of course the states then should also be called states, and also not time, but also this is then a state. And if we have a look at the states, we should probably call them ready, in work, and done. And then we have proper states. And having this, we can now create a proper perspective for that. For that, we have a look at the people. We do away with the allocation, and this is still called project because actually we wanted it to be renamed to the task as well. And maybe also we want to factor it in again because we want to have free text fields. So again, we're patching around here. And now it looks mostly like a Kanban board. It just has one drawback because there's always just one task per line. And for that we have nested shapes, nested perspectives. You can pull in the rank over here. And now you see Alan has quite a lot of tasks, 2 in the ready state, 4 in the work state, 1 over there. And you can start moving as you like with drag and drop, and move it around to anybody you want. And of course, if you're curious how this actually looks like, you can also have a look what the more or less real data looks like and what impact it has if we shift something around. So it depends. Sometimes the impact is rather little. If we do change the rank, it will be bigger and there will be more changes. Yeah. Good. This also actually works for clusters. So you could take the full of Alan and say, I want to drag it over here, and then all of the tasks will be there for Jezeliah because that was our target over here. So it works not just on single cells, but rather generally. We can make another use case. For that, let's make a new table and let's call it days. Inside the days, let's add, obviously, or let's rename it today, and we add Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then let's make another one. Let's call it sessions, because we're doing sessions planning. And for that, we take the allocation and we add then the day. We're referencing the days, and in there's just one field. We're also adding the person, like the persons, and also here the person. And then let's have a look over here what we can do with it. We can now say we want to see all the people for all the days having the allocations, and we even do away with the rank. Now this looks pretty blank, especially if I start to delete the single existing cell, but there's one thing that we can do. We can say list all the persons and also list all the days. And now if we close it, and again for better imagination, let's move it over here. And let's have a look at the session plannings. So that's the real data, if you want to call it like that, and that's the virtual one. We can start adding access when people will be working actually, and on the left hand side you will see how the data will just be added. And you can either move around, or you can edit it over here, and this will of course have an impact on the other side. So that's, for example, session planning. Something similar that you can also do is a floor planning. For that you might need to do some sort of indices table, and for the indices let's rename that to index, and then we just, let's call it A, B, C, D, E if we like, and we go to persons, and for persons we add more fields, we call a row, index, we refer to index, and here also to index, and we add a column, we also refer to index and to index. And in a similar way we can also say we want to see the row over here, the column over there, and we do away with the city swipe. By the way, we can also just deselect it and then it's gone. And with the same trick we can say, okay, let us view all the rows and all the columns, but not the ranks. At least not like this. We have to pull in the rank over here again. And then we can do floor planning. We can shift people around. For the time being we can shift all over here, so then they are defined, and then we can start putting Alan over here, Helen over there, and Max over there. And if you will allocate all the people, then at some point in time they will have proper places if you manage it. We won't do that till the end right now. In any shape we can also expand history and navigate back and forth. For that it's probably better to go to the allocations. You can go back in time. We didn't do that many commits. And there's more to embrace, but that'll be another story.